Hi everyone. This is our first live stream today, the AI show. I'm Diksha and I have
And
Sophia with me.
I'm Sophia, and I'm so glad to be here, and it's so very exciting to be joining Diksha for this very first live stream. And yeah, there's so much happening in the AI space. Tell me, what are we going to do now?
Yeah, so this is, when we plan this out, this is a show that kind of provides a platform uh, for people who are outside of the US, primarily in Asia and Europe, specifically because there's so much innovation happening around AI, especially in the last 2 weeks. It's obviously like full of headlines in terms of how some of the Asian models are performing, etc. And we wanted to give a platform for founders, different kind of builders and researchers in Asia and Europe, that I feel are currently underrepresented in some way by the mainstream channels. So yeah, that's really the reason we started this, and I don't know how this will pan out, but I'm super excited, to have you because you have like a great view in terms of like what's happening in the AI markets in Europe, and I wanted to cover it from Asia because this is where I am in Singapore, like really the hotspot of tech, if you will. So that's really about it, and that's really the show. And eventually, we will find people who are building in AI, obviously, and we want to bring some of the best practitioners out here to talk about it. Not just the builders, but also some of the leaders in enterprises that are like running these things hands on. Yeah, so really excited.
Absolutely. And honestly, we're just curious, and this stuff it moves every day. Actually, it's not even every week now. So we want to keep up, and we figured it out. Let's do it loud and bring people along. So that's us, and let's dive into it.
Yeah, so obviously I have to start with this big discussion that we've been seeing on Twitter and everyone else, which is, recently we saw Coinbase CEO shared a critical insight in terms of how his company is managing to keep their AI spend completely flat, right? To be honest, I have been building this small project and my June bills have been crazy. And I was honestly wondering like how enterprise tech is really keeping up with this. And now you have it. You have this discussion everywhere on Twitter. And I'm so excited to deep dive into this because, if you actually see internal token usage has grown exponentially for enterprise tech, that's what I'm hearing from everyone. And, at some level, whether it's at the org level or the project level, people are really working on this framework to kind of bring the cost down. And obviously, when Brian Armstrong posted about it, it resonated so much with people, right? And I would say this kind of highlights kind of like a situation or a crisis, if you will, in enterprise tech right now. And sure, I mean AI will generate revenue in billions, but the fact that AI is built crazily as well, that need to be kind of kept in mind as well. So yeah, I think when you provide an input to an AI and when you actually get an output, it kind of gets billed separately, and the output is obviously way higher than the input, and that actually like really there are different elements that get into like these AI spend and the bills that we receive, right? And I can talk from my smaller experience from the project that I'm running, but yeah, we'll eventually see how enterprise tech is kind of taking care of it. Yeah, what do you think about that?
Well, this is the kind of paradox that the market is only just catching. And see, the cost of individual tokens, they have plummeted. According to RAMP's data, the blended cost per million tokens fell roughly from $10 to $2.5 in 365 days. And Gartner expects another 90 plus percent drop in provider inference costs by 2030. So basically what is happening and what all these stats are about is you pay less per unit, but you consume vastly more of it. So it is like the Jevons paradox applied to machine intelligence. But but still, for enterprises, I think it's still about blowing budgets. And we see a lot of reports in the industry lately. For example, the FinOps Foundation recently found that 73% of enterprises blew past their original AI budgets. So me and Diksha, we both spoke to some AI heads in startups and enterprises, and we figured out that most companies are actually actively working on these frameworks in Asia as well as in Europe. So just like Coinbase, and we all know companies like Uber are working on this as well. And lately, I believe the Uber CTO noted that the company torched its entire 2026 AI budget in just 4 months, as the adoption of cloud code jumped from 32% to 84% among its engineers. So yeah, it's crazy. And maybe here we can just also talk about what's happening on the enterprise front.
Yeah, if you actually look at things, there are, I mean, obviously, after this discussion on Twitter, I've been like very closely monitoring it and looking at it. From what I've seen, there's so many companies already that are trying to prioritize, different kind of architecture and tiers to help people, to build an architecture around the AI spend, and kind of like bring it down. So it's already happening, and this is one of the founders, obviously, that I saw, and there a few more companies from what I can see. I'm not sure if this is a there are builders around it in Asia, but it's definitely heating up this product that'll help
Absolutely.
enterprises. Actually, I spoke to a few enterprise heads here in Singapore this week to understand how this is shaping up for them. And it's super early days, of course, but everyone was kind of clear that you cannot really just wait out the bill, when it comes to AI, because the usage is obviously increasing, and you somehow have to build frameworks to kind of out engineer it. And the spread between optimized and unoptimized architecture is kind of enormous. So everyone's trying to like working to fill this gap. And the standard pattern that I saw when I spoke to some of these leaders is that we're seeing that about 70% of traffic can be sent or is being sent to like cheap models, for a lack of a better word, and 20% to some, kind of like mid-tier models that are a little more expensive. And then lastly, for like the most complex tasks, expensive frontier calls. And also, when I spoke to some leaders, they said some of the best engineers kind of like use the top model. So you could give it like a 10% of the tasks that are being used, by that are being basically sent to some of the high end models, if you will, that requires heavy reasoning. So this is how the division of tasks is kind of playing out at this point, which is already super exciting, because if you look at a few months back, this was not the ratio, right? Like people were by default using the AI, the US AI labs and their models, right? And
Yeah.
then from what I understand, there are various techniques and frameworks that people are working on, and yeah, we kind of saw that on Twitter as well. There's semantic caching that people are working on to kind of store some of the answers into the model, so that when new questions are popped up or new answers are needed, it doesn't really require any extra cost. The context compression that people are using, prompt optimization obviously is a big one, and there are many more. Mechanics that go into this, and yeah, this could actually, routing paired with caching alone apparently is cutting call volumes by 30 to 50%. Can you imagine? So the gap between an AI massive bill and a sustainable one is just pure engineering, pure architecture. If you can really work on it, and if you can get some of the best people to kind of like optimize it for you, you can easily build this. So which is very interesting, and I'm super excited to see how this plays out with different enterprises, because that's where the bills are kind of like blowing up, right? Even though I
Absolutely.
find my $1,000 bill crazy, right?
Absolutely. Oh, I saw this funny tweet where you got like $15,000 a bill from Anthropic. Imagine that, like
Yeah.
straight out of your checking account, and yeah, like your fiance wondering if this is the engagement ring or not, and then it's just AI bills.
Yeah,
But
that's
yeah, everything,
that would
everything
be a
that you
wedding gift, right? Like,
Absolutely. I mean, this bill is crazy, especially for some startup owners or small enterprises, and where like people don't have the expenses to actually cover these costs. And everything that you mentioned, like on the enterprise layer and like how they're doing it, actually that's why I guess that we see that the middle layer is where the money is at right now. So getting more intelligence per dollar isn't actually automatic, and someone has to understand the company's actual workflow well enough to build that routing, test the models, drive this adoption among the whole enterprise. And that's usually a person, and that's still a person. And that person has a name now, and that's the forward deployed engineer. So basically, what this JD is trying to figure out is cost optimization, tiered architecture for AI, and that's basically the job description. So my guess is that we will keep seeing these new frameworks getting built as this new role takes shape here in Europe, but also in Asia. And it's one of the hottest roles right now in the enterprise tech. I think it was Palantir that basically invented it. And once OpenAI and Anthropic started hiring these people by the hundreds, everyone copied it. So posting for new role grew over 1,000% in just 1 year.
yeah,
And I
I mean,
guess,
if you
yeah,
see this, if you see this article, from Straits Times, which is specifically about the Singapore market, this is the hardest job in Singapore right now. If you look at like LinkedIn jobs, most of the AI jobs are around forward deploying engineers in the enterprise tech. So this is definitely, I mean, the primary goal of this guy or girl is to kind of build enterprise tech within the enterprise, but this is going to be like a big part of their role to kind of optimize costs for AI and figure that architecture that we're all talking about.
absolutely. And I think that these engineers are supposed to be out earning learning researchers at several frontier labs. And according to Q1's report from Palantir, like the revenue jumped from to 85% and 133% US commercial growth. And this is the hard proof that everyone is chasing this exact thesis, and everybody wants to get such a engineer on their team. And Diksha, but the other half of this story is also the open source side, right? So what are people doing in the China market and generally in Asia from your point of view?
Yeah, I mean, this has like a big um, the open source models are playing a huge part in this entire cost optimization story. And obviously, like, people are recognizing this. And DeepSeek, for example, recently released a model V4 that runs roughly 14 cents per million input tokens and 28 cents per output. Like I said, the input output varies, and outputs, you know, obviously more expensive. And apparently, this is like 35 to 100 times cheaper than your GPT 5.5 or like a Cloud Opus 4.8. But we obviously have seen that GPT 5.6 is here now, and there are interesting models for like different tiers, which they're calling Sol, Terra, and Luna. I think this happened last week, if I'm not wrong, the launch.
Exactly.
Yeah. Have you tried them, or How have you heard from anyone how they're performing?
Actually, that was on my to-do list for today, right after we finish this live stream, because it's super interesting just to check out the capabilities and where they're what we can do with them. But yeah, I think that it's very innovative on behalf of OpenAI to break it down into tiers, because it's going to be one cost for a marketing manager, then a different one for the R&D head of engineering, right? So it's very, very important that everybody gets access to these models, and yeah, and they can actually apply it to their company budgets.
Absolutely. And if you see, yeah, going back to the open source models, if we look at the adoption curve from the past few weeks, if not months, it's kind of interesting because they now represent, the DeepSeeks and Command and the Chinese open source models kind of represent roughly 30% of the global token usage, depending on where they're banned and where they're allowed. In a way, passing US models, if I'm not wrong, in the token consumption. Also, recently, a lot of like leaders in the US have taken into account that how some of the models are really performing at par with your US models, which is interesting. Because there was obviously this perception that there's this like gap between the two models in terms of performance, and that's obviously narrowing down now. For example, you have the latest GLM 5.2, apparently that matches Claude Mythos in cybersecurity, which is amazing. And
Absolutely.
from where I'm seeing this kind of creates a two-track economy, right? The Chinese open source models have become the commodity subtrade um, for high volume tasks, right? Low stakes work. Your summarization, your classification tasks, and where in the US closed models hold the premier tier, where reliability, I mean, I'm still hearing this from a lot of people that they still want reliability and they find it in those models. Enterprise trust, and some of the hardest reasoning tasks. So they some of them prefer that, but it's changing. It's really changing. And if you were to like talk about a counter narrative here, there is definitely this narrative from Claude that open source models are dangerous, right? So
Yeah.
it's definitely a race now, because I think the market probably thought that the open source models won't really match the performance, but that's not happening, right? Like that's not really the case. So now we just see, from the regulatory point of view, how things kind of change. And yeah, I mean, there could be, like I said, there could be a performance gap that we saw a few months back, but that's narrowing down. And yeah, that brings me to some of the exciting other news, which is related. Do you want to talk about the recent Fable story and how it panned out?
Yeah, I believe it's very, very important that before we wrap up, we need to talk about this and what happened with Anthropic, because it completely validates everything we just discussed and why the world is aggressively looking for alternative models. In a massive update this weekend, the US Commerce Department partially lifted its blanket ban on Anthropic's powerful new Mythos 5 model, allowing just about 100 trusted institutions and Fortune 500 companies. However, Anthropic's other major model, Fable 5, remains entirely banned for public use. So I don't think that the US government did actually set out the ban to these models for everyday Americans. It was just a casualty of this old Cold War era provision called a deemed export. Under US law, if a German or an Indian engineer logs into Fable 5 from an office in California, let's say, the US government legally considers this an export to Germany or India, which is crazy because Anthropic cannot verify passports in real time across an API. And the only way they could comply with the rule aimed at foreign nationals would be to pull the plug on everybody globally, and we all suffer the consequences of it. So this brings us to this critical geopolitical shift. So by abruptly ripping state-of-the-art capabilities away from the public, the US government inadvertently is doing a massive favor to open source competitors, particularly those out of Europe and China, in my opinion. Because if you need an AI to autonomously rewrite an entire massive software code base, models like Cloud Opus 4.8 or GPT 5.5, and probably now 5.6, still hold the definitive lead, often beating even models by 10 to 14 points on high-end coding benchmarks. So it's crazy because for everyday enterprise workflows, algorithmic tasks and data retrieval, the gap is effectively closed. So DeepSeek V4 Pro, as you mentioned, really could beat Cloud Opus on certain algorithmic benchmarks, and it does so at roughly 28 times cheaper, which is crazy. And we will probably see more of that. Even out of Europe, we see France's Mistral Large 3 is now delivering frontier level intelligence while guaranteeing European data privacy, which, as we all know, is the biggest issue for EU, and data privacy is very hot topic and very much on the top of everything that's going on the defense frontier, but also in the technology frontier. And yeah, maybe I'll get it over to you, Diksha. Maybe some ultimate takeaways from what we just discussed for our listeners today.
Yeah, I think interesting that you mentioned security about, when it comes to Europe, they obviously have been very concerned. So it really, I'm super excited in terms of like how different countries, different geographies are going to adopt this new architecture, and which models would kind of play a part. And yeah, that's why we're watching these markets really closely in Europe and Asia. It also is very interesting because these markets are somewhat connected. Like they have this like cross geographic expansion that we have, be it Mistral or even like some of the open source models, and especially some of the countries where, for example, India. The builders are really trying to find a way to build great things, and they do need cheaper models. So it's going to be interesting, and I feel that this week and the last few days, the ultimate takeaway for everyone out there is that if you're building in Asia or Europe, you don't have to rely entirely on US models. And that means regulatory aspects kind of play a big role here as well, because models are being shut down from what I've seen, and that could be a risk as well. And there are obviously risks on the other side, which we'll see how things play out, and how these companies manage these risks, right? Because these things are out there, people are discussing this. And yeah, I mean, models coming out of Europe and China are already fast enough, smart enough from what we're seeing in the last 2 weeks, and cheap enough to run like major tasks, right? So the performance gap
Absolutely.
at the bleeding edge is shrinking for sure by the month, if not by the week. For the rest of the world, I guess bridging that final gap using open source models is going to be like a necessity, and no more just an option, I guess, from what we're seeing, because there's so many teams working on it. And yeah, this is really like some of the top companies, even startups. Yeah, so that was actually all of it for today, unless you have anything else to cover. But a really, really exciting week in AI for sure. And yeah, I'm super excited to like for our next. Oh, by the way, we'll be having like two live streams every week,
Yeah,
Mondays and Fridays. We'll see how that goes. Eventually, we'll have like some very interesting guests on board as well. So yeah, but for this week, it was definitely very hot and exciting in AI.
absolutely. And super glad to be doing this. I guess the best is yet to come, especially for AI builders out of Asia and Europe. And looking forward to connecting with more of them. And just like a final call to action for everybody that's listening, if you're an AI builder based out of Asia, feel free to reply, hit our DMs, and let us know, and we can get you on the show.
Absolutely. All right, signing off from the AI show. See you on Friday.
See you.